new wave of cinema, directors dare to break the mold of traditional film techniques. From neo-realism's harsh depictions of poverty to New Hollywood's young countercultural proponents, the boundaries of cinema are constantly being broken. Yet despite film's expanses, one boundary remains: the male gaze. Amidst cinema's advancements, the male gaze lingers, survives, and thrives. I ask you, watcher, yes, I know I'm breaking the fourth wall, but this isn't just any old video essay. This is a conversation. So come with me and travel back in time as we trace the life of the male gaze together. Wait, before we travel back in time, let's first establish what the male gaze is. Filmmaker Laura Mulvey coined the term in her 1975 essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. She defined the male gaze as the following. In a world ordered by sexual imbalance, pleasure in looking has been split between active male and passive female. The determining male gaze projects its fantasy onto the female figure, which is styled accordingly. Women are simultaneously looked at and displayed with their appearance coded for strong visual and erotic impact, so that they can be said to connotate to be looked at-ness. With our definition of the male gaze, we can resume our travels. The first stop on our itinerary is Old Hollywood. Old Hollywood encapsulates Mulvey's idea of to-be-looked-at-ness. Despite being the golden age of Hollywood, numerous actresses suffered under the pressure to look a certain way if they were to even have the slightest chance of a close-up. If they didn't meet the standard ideals of beauty, well, there's a reason the saying, beauty is pain, exists. Golden Age star Margarita Carmen, better known as Rita Hayworth, is just one of the various actresses who underwent procedures to fit this golden era's standard of beauty. From painful hairline electrolysis to lightening her skin with bleach and dyeing her dark hair auburn, Carmen was transformed into Hayworth, all done to help make her a star, which it did. This transformation of the look made her into one of old Hollywood's staple actresses. She later changed her look again, this time dyeing her hair blonde. The change from ginger to blonde was heavily advocated by her husband and old Hollywood director, Orson Welles. He wanted her hair blonde for the role of Elsa Bannister in his upcoming 1947 film noir, The Lady from Shanghai. The hair change was a flop. Audiences performed Hayworth's auburn hair. So why did Welles advocate so heavily for Hayworth's transformation? After all, if something's not broken, why fix it? Hayworth was to play Elsa in The Lady from Shanghai. Her character was the female fatale, a seductive woman who ensnares her lovers in deadly traps. A character that still remains and is seen in modern films, such as in Catwoman from Batman or Black Widow from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Welles didn't believe that Hayworth, with her ginger hair, would be able to convince the audience of Elsa's villainous seduction, so he advocated for the sexier hair color, blonde. However, the sexier Elsa's character became, the higher the risk her character faced. During the production of The Lady from Shanghai, Hollywood's production code was harsh on women's sexuality. Any sexual acts had to be counteracted with a moral consequence. It's the reason so many horror movies kill off anyone who has sex.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. Big no-no! Big no!
I'm a dead man.
Even in popcorn, sex equals death, okay? Number 2.
As such, the seductive Elsa had to commit murders and die at the end of the film to show audiences that women's sexuality equaled that of bad moral character, which was always punished. The female fatale fell into her own trap of deadly seduction. The next stop on our new waves of cinema trip is Italian neorealism. Despite Italian neorealism's advancement in portraying the raw reality of poverty and oppression within cinema, the movement fell victim to the male gaze, a gaze which is heavily portrayed in neorealist director Federico Fellini's 1963 film 8½. In the film's Dream of King Solomon sequence, all the women in protagonist Guido's life are present. However, all these women are either mothers, caregivers, muses, or lovers. Fellini echoes Welles' actions of placing women within categories, confining them to stereotypes and making them objects. Director Bud Butcher describes this objectification. She's the one, or rather the love or fear she inspires in the hero, or else the concern he feels for her, who makes him act the way he does. In herself, the woman has not the slightest importance. The women in the film are there to carry the protagonist along. As Mulvey states, the women are simply the bearer of meaning, not the maker. In the case of 8½, the women quite literally are objects used to carry the male protagonist towards a greater meaning. When they can no longer help him, they are thrown away. The audience sees this rejection of woman through the old showgirl. She's no longer useful in Guido's films because she is old and as such ugly. The audience sees the male gaze's idea that old, ugly, and useless are synonymous, as seen when the showgirl is discarded, thrown away to rot upstairs, away from the production of movies. This rejection of older, uglier women is mirrored in Sunset Boulevard when silent film star Norma Desmond is considered outdated to star in the Hollywood films. She's left on the set while the production carries on without her. This rejection of women results in their silence, a silence that is emphasized within the framing techniques of the male gaze. Returning to the lady from Shanghai, the lens of a telescope is used to frame Elsa. Not only is Elsa objectified within the script, rendering her as nothing but a seductress to the audience, but the framing lens of this scene further emphasizes that objectification, and as such, her silence. She's placed in a frame, and like a picture, she cannot speak. She can only be looked at. This usage of framing women within a viewfinder is seen as various other movies, such as Alfred Hitchcock's 1954 film Rear Window. In this particular scene, the female and male characters both have viewing devices, but the audience only sees through the lens of male protagonist L.B. Jeff's telescope. Since the audience is confined to the single viewpoint, the audience is forced to become the male protagonist. It doesn't matter if the audience member is female or non-binary. For the period of viewing the film, the entire audience is male. The audience becomes a peeping Tom. We now return from the past to the 21st century. Despite the advancements in Hollywood, the audience is still a peeping Tom. The peeping Tom is still portrayed through composition, a bit in a different way. Here we see the particular framing of a woman's body, a body that is cut into pieces. We see arms, legs, ass. The woman is cut up, her full body isn't shown. Most of the time, if her full body is presented on screen, is through a slow motion pan, lingering over the female parts of the body, resulting in a still cut up viewing of the body. This cutting up of women's bodies are depicted within the scene from Superbad. The Kuslov effect is utilized to show protagonist Evan looking at Becca's breast. Her feminine, physical aspects are prioritized over her sense of self, such as her intelligence. The setting of the classroom only makes this fact more ironic. Directors are emphasizing the body. It's also seen in the saddest music in the world, which centers around Lady Helen Porthuntley's glass beer legs. But her legs aren't even her own. They are a fragile construction made by a man. Her legs, which should connotate autonomy, instead emphasize her objectification. But what if a director rejects this objectification? What if a new gaze is found? Let's now take a look at the female gaze. The female gaze offers a counter to the male gaze. It shows how women are perceived through the eyes of other women, as people with feelings and intelligence. The focus isn't necessarily on what the eye can see, but on what the heart can feel. In Celine Sciamma's 2019 film Portrait of a Lady on Fire, the female gaze is on bright display. Instead of homing in on the physical nature of women, the emotions and intelligence of women are highlighted. Yes, this is still a love story between two women, but the female gaze rises above the sexual desires. Protagonists Eloise and Marianne see each other. The idea that men cannot see past the sexual desire of women is seen within Eloise's original portrait. The portrait was painted by a man and consisted of just her body. The face was not present. The face, that wonderful part of the body that holds a woman's intelligence and emotions, was erased. The painting is simply a material consequence of the male gaze. In the revised final portrait created by Marianne, the audience sees Eloise as a full person, more than just her sex. The audience sees her face. Close-ups of faces can be used to break the male gaze. Composition, specifically framing, which is used to reinforce the male gaze, can be turned around to instead reinforce the female gaze. With close-ups, the female gaze is shown as it focuses on the character's inner self rather than the physical. Just like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, John Waters' 1972 film Pink Flamingos is part of queer cinema. and queer cinema opens up another space to further break the male gaze. According to director Teresa De Laurentiis, a queer text must carry the inscription of sexuality as something more than sex in order to be considered queer. Audiences see this idea portrayed in Pink Flamingos when Edie finds pleasure in eggs. Yes, eggs. No woman is objectified in this pleasurable scene. Rather than objectifying people, Edie finds pleasure in actual objects. Through this pleasure in eggs, the male gaze is subverted. These eggs are just one of the many aspects that make Pink Flamingos a mind-blowing narrative. We need more of these mind-blowing narratives that subvert the male gaze. We need to create a space for female and queer directors so that their viewpoints can be shown, so that new gazes, new stories can be viewed. We need to hear their stories from their perspectives because, after all, isn't cinema supposed to reflect our world, and are women not a part of that world?